The world is no longer silent. The international community is no longer silent. We are forced as human rights activists, as Kashmir activists, to revisit our own language and how we approach this conflict. So the question facing Pakistan right now and facing us here as influencers, as lobbyists, as I would assume as policymakers as well, is whether Pakistan should allow the UN access to Azad Kashmir or not, or should we place ourselves at the same level that India has placed, where India has placed itself by denying access to the UN? Should we do the same thing? Should we give more priority to reciprocity? Since India is not allowing the UN, we should do the same thing? Or should we break away from reciprocity and give full access to the UN? And these are very important questions that are facing Pakistani decision makers. And for this, I would like to invite Dr. Mohammad Faisal, Director, South Asia and SAARC at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Government of Pakistan, and the official spokesperson of the ministry. Dr. Faisal.
It is excellent to be here and to listen to the views of senior diplomats, our teachers, and the Kashmiris here on how they see the new development, that is the OHCHR report on Jammu and Kashmir. This report is a major breakthrough for Pakistan and a watershed amidst the false and deceitful narrative propagated by India over unlawful occupation of Jammu and Kashmir. With its categorical focus on gross, systemic and state-sponsored human rights violations in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, the report validates Pakistan's repeated claims of the atrocities being committed by the Indian occupation forces. The contents, scale, and the narrative of killings, maiming, abuse, and impunity articulated in the report is a reaffirmation of what Pakistan has long highlighted before the international community. Finally, the international community has woken up. The report documents in detail the impunity with which Indian occupation forces commit human rights violations and the brutalities against innocent Kashmiris, as well as lack of access to justice for the victims. It highlights the draconian Armed Forces Special Powers Act, AFSPA, and the Public Safety Act, so-called PSA, which impede accountability of Indian occupation forces and obstruct the course of law. Use of pellet guns, excessive use of force, arbitrary arrests and detentions, torture, use of rape as an instrument of suppression and subjugation, and violation of basic rights to life, property, education, and health. This is not something that Pakistan is saying. This is directly being quoted from the report of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. It also underscores the almost permanent communication blockade, especially suspension of internet services by Indian occupation forces in an attempt to prevent the voices of the Kashmiris from reaching the international community. Pakistan has welcomed the Commission of Inquiry, as was pointed out, which is in line with our earlier calls for an independent fact-finding mission to look into the human rights violations in Indian-occupied Kashmir at all forums, including the UN Secretary General. And as anticipated, India, in its utter distress, has not only rejected the report, but has also indulged in a malicious campaign to challenge the credibility of the report by distorting facts and figures. The fact of the matter is that the OHCHR report has unveiled the systemic and state-sponsored human rights abuses in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, which has caught India completely off guard. India's intensified violence against the people of Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir in the wake of this report, after this report, is another testament of India's restiveness over the report. The brutal assassination of veteran journalist Shujat Bukhari Sahib in cold blood just hours after his tweet on the OHCHR report raises serious questions regarding the motivation behind his shahadat. The imposition of governor rule in IOK, ensuing Indian statements about a crackdown in IOK, house arrest of the Hurriyat leadership, and reports of deployment of NSG commandos for so-called quote-unquote anti-terrorism operations are forerunners of escalated Indian attempts to further try to suppress Kashmiris through brute force. The article written by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights in the Indian Express defending the report, and the UN Secretary General's statement backing the Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights, calling it the voice of the UN, dilutes desperate Indian attempts to call the credibility of the report into question. This is not what we are saying. This is the UN Secretary General. हम नहीं कह रहे, दुनिया कह रही. The Secretary General has reaffirmed the prestige and status that the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights enjoys and the respect it deserves. That India would stoop to mudslinging the highest officers of the UN simply because they are exposing India's true face to the world is beyond shameful. The statements by international human rights organizations, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, which endorsed the OHCHR report on Kashmir, as well as the formation of Kashmir Commission of Inquiry condemning India's draconian laws in IOK and regretting India's reckless reaction to the report, hold immense significance. Recently, the Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights has issued a press release expressing its extreme disappointment on India's malicious propaganda against the report, as well as reaffirmed its commitment to public, impartial, objective information on the situation in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Again, I emphasize, this is not what we are saying. This is for what the High Commissioner's office is saying. Pakistan is actively promoting the report, sharing it with our missions. The missions are sharing it with intelligentsia, local governments, media. It is finding resonance all over the world. The aim remains that the Commission of Inquiry should be formulated, and it should visit both AJ&K and Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. As you are well aware, the Independent Permanent Human Rights Commission of the OIC has already visited AJ&K and submitted a very, very comprehensive report. Other EU delegation, other people have also been regularly visiting AJ&K. As we say repeatedly, we have nothing to hide. We are open to all to visit. The people of Jammu and Kashmir have been struggling to exercise the legitimate right to self-determination, granted to them through numerous UN Security Council resolutions for more than 7 decades. It is high time that the international community fulfills its promises to the Kashmiri people. In line with our repeated requests to establish a UN fact-finding mission and the OHCHR's recommendation, we call upon the world to urge India to put an immediate halt to the bloodshed in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and for the expedited establishment of the Commission of Inquiry for an independent, comprehensive, international investigation into Indian atrocities in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. I thank you all.